Hello, dear friends. Today I thought we would deal with the first chapter in your textbook, which is the last lesson. Don't you think it is ironical that the first chapter of your textbook is called the last lesson? It's not without a reason. Before we go into the lesson itself, let me give you some background about the story. The lesson was written by somebody called Alphonse Daudet. The spelling is D-A-U-D-E-T, but it's pronounced Daudet because it's a French name. And the lesson deals with linguistic chauvinism and its impact on two provinces of France that border Germany. Two provinces, you can call them two states or two districts of France that border Germany. The provinces are Alsace and Lorraine. What is linguistic chauvinism? Linguistic chauvinism is the feeling that a particular language is superior and the people who speak a particular language are superior. For example, we know that the Germans under Hitler and even before that had a superiority complex that they were the best race in the world. Similarly, they also felt that their language, German, was the best language in the world. So, they were very much interested and intent in imposing their language on all other countries. And they also wanted to make sure that other languages were not spoken. The war that we speak about in this lesson is called the Franco-Prussian War, which took place between 1870 and 1871. In those days, there was a kingdom in Europe called Prussia. The kingdom was founded in 1528 and it lasted until almost 1918, that is almost at the end of the First World War. The kingdom of Prussia was basically composed of many German-speaking states. Germany is not the only country in the world that speaks German. There are many other neighboring countries that also use Germany as their language. And many of these countries came together to form a kingdom called Prussia. So many of these countries were Belgium, Lithuania, parts of Austria, parts of Russia, parts of Switzerland, parts of Poland. All these were, German-speaking territories. And they came and formed a kingdom called Prussia. And in the particular war that we are speaking about, the Franco-Prussian War, they were led by the Chancellor of Prussia, who was Otto von Bismarck. So it so happened that Bismarck attacked France. Actually, he provoked France into attacking Prussia, and finally Prussia conquered France. So these provinces which stay at the border of France and Germany, they used France as their mother tongue. And the Germans were very much intent that they should impose their language on these provinces and gradually the whole of France as well. The story takes place in the province of Alsace. Understand? And our young protagonist, who's the protagonist? Protagonist is the main character. One of the main characters in the story is a young boy called Franz. Please don't confuse it with the country France. The name of the boy is Franz, F-A-R-N-Z or Z, Franz. Okay. And the other important character in the lesson is the teacher of French called Monsieur Hamel. In your textbook you will find that it is M. Hamel. M stands for Monsieur, which is equal to Mr. in English. You know that different languages used use different words while addressing a person. For example, in India, you use Shri, Srimati, Kumari, and all these words. For example, in Italian, you'll find signor, signora. Understand? In Spanish, you'd find senor, senorita. In French, you find monsieur, which is equal to Mr. Understand? In German, it is Herr, Herr, Herr. Understand? So, our young boy, Franz, like all other young boys of his time, is not very much interested in going to school. This is because he feels that school is a waste of time. School is a waste of time, and he doesn't have the time or the motivation or the intention to go to school and study. So one day morning, he was going to school, and he knew that he had to reach school because he would be questioned about participle by Monsieur Hamel, and he had not prepared for it. He had spent all his time probably playing or wasting his time or whatever, and there were so many temptations for him. He wanted to go riding on the river Sar. He was thinking about the beautiful birds, the beautiful country, or he wanted to see the soldiers doing their march past. But somehow he resists all temptations and he reaches school. Now, when he reaches school, before he reaches school, he sees there is a crowd gathered at the bulletin board in the crossroad of the town. In those days, they did not have television or radios and any other form of electronic communication. So most of the important news of the day, would be written on a bulletin board in the town square. You might have heard in olden days in India also, even today in many villages, they use this tom-tom system. Using a government agent, he beats a drum and he gives the announcement in the village. In Malayalam, it is called Vilambaram. I don't know what it's called in other languages. So this is somewhat a similar system where the important news of the day is written on a bulletin board and displayed in the center of the town square. Understand? So as Franz was passing through this town square, he finds a lot of people were gathered in the square and they were looking at this bulletin board. Franz wondered what happened. Every day they used to get bad news about the war. So he didn't really pay much attention to it. And when he was going, somebody from there called and said, "Young man, Franz, don't be in such a hurry. You will be reaching school in plenty of time." So Franz immediately did not understand the meaning of this sentence. He thought probably the man was teasing me because I was going late to school. And he just did not pay much attention to it, and he proceeded on his way, and he reached the school. And as we know, in any working day at a school, you'll find a lot of noise. There'll be children repeating their lessons loudly. The teacher's voice, a lot of shouting going on. Understand? All over, it's a very lively place. It's a very lively and vibrant place, a school. Now, when Franz reached there, he found that there was a deathly silence in the school. He wondered, is it a holiday? And he said, no, it's not a holiday. And slowly, he went to his classroom and he saw that everybody was already gathered there. And not only that, he also found that his teacher was wearing his best dress, the dress that he wore on inspection days and the dress that he wore on prize distribution ceremonies and annual day and all such functions. So he was expecting that because there'll be a lot of noise and children studying and teacher teaching, without anybody's notice, he could just sneak into the class. But unfortunately, that was not the case. The moment he reached the class, everybody saw him. And his teacher told him, "Come on, dear Franz, come on. We were almost, beginning without you." And Franz, he felt very embarrassed because he was late. He was caught in front of the class, and he slowly went and sat in his place. And then he noticed something really special. He found that the elder people of the village were sitting in the back benches. A man called Hauser, the village postmaster, the old mayor, and all these people were sitting in the last benches. He wondered what this was about. And he soon found out what it was about. Major Hamel made a statement. He said, "Dear children, this is the last French lesson. Now, our country has been captured by Germans. Today, I am going to deliver my last lesson in French. Tomorrow onwards, there is no more permission to learn French in the school. Rather, you have to learn German. The new teacher comes tomorrow." Suddenly, Franz, these words were a thunderclap to him. He wondered, last French lesson? I don't even know to read and write. I wasted all my time. Understand? My God, this is really horrible. What can I do? Anyway, he was asked to repeat his participles, what he was afraid of, which he had not studied. And he could not do it. And he felt very, very bad about it. Then Major Hamel said, "Dear Franz, you're feeling bad now. You're feeling bad that you're not able to repeat participles in your own language. You had a lot of time to study. You did not study. You wasted all your time. And today what has happened? Today your language is no longer yours. Remember, today is the last French lesson. Tomorrow onwards, even if you want to study French, you will not get an opportunity because you are going to be forced to study German language by the Germans." And Franz, like all other people there, feels very, 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 very sad and very bad. But unfortunately, there is no solution. You have lost your language. Imagine what it is like losing your mother tongue, the language with which you can express yourself best. Suddenly, the language has become alien to you. It becomes illegal to use your own language. Imagine what they would be feeling. What would be going through their mind? Germans have imposed their language. Your language is no longer valid. Your language is no longer useful. And even if you want to study your language, there is no longer any opportunity to do that. With all these thoughts going through his mind, Franz was looking at his books. These books that seemed so heavy earlier, they seemed like his enemies. Now they looked like friends. But it was too late. And then Major Hamel said, "French is the best language in the world. It is the most logical language. It is the clearest language. And remember, when you are imprisoned by any other enemy country, your mother tongue or your language is the key to your imprisonment. As long as you have your language, you feel there is meaning in life. There is hope. But once you lose your language, there will be nothing left." So it is always very important that You hold close to your language. You hold your language close to your chest. You value your language. Understand? And because these people could not do that, today they were on the verge of losing their beautiful language, that is French. Of course, Monsieur Hamel says there were many reasons for the lack of learning in Alsace. What were the reasons? He says children were not interested to learn. They were always interested in going outside and wasting their time, maybe sliding on the river, watching the soldiers marching, hunting after birds' eggs. Were the parents interested? No. The parents also had their own shortcomings. Instead of sending them to school, what did the parents prefer to do? The parents wanted them to go and work so that they could earn more money. And what about the teacher himself? M. Hamel is such a practical man, such a truthful and honest man, that he says even he is not without shortcomings. When he had to teach the children, he made the children water the plants in his garden. And when he felt like going fishing, he gave a holiday to the entire school. So these are the three reasons that Monsieur Hamel cites, as the reasons for the lack of learning in Alsace. 1, the children were not interested to learn. 2, the parents, instead of sending the children to school, were more interested in putting them to work so that they could earn extra money. And the teacher himself sometimes did not teach. He sent the children to water the plants. And sometimes when he wanted to go fishing, he sent the children home and said, today is a holiday. So, whatever be the case, today it has happened that they are going to lose their language. The teacher feels very bad. The children also feel very bad. And France feels that lesson was the best French lesson because all the children and the elders listened with rapt attention. And the teacher taught with so much interest, as if, he wanted to give everything he knew in this one last lesson. So it was such an emotional moment, an emotionally helpless moment, where the children wanted to learn, the teacher wanted to teach, but there was no time left. Everything was lost. And Monsieur Hamel had made, copywriting, France, Alsace, France, Alsace. This is what he had written in his beautiful handwriting. And the children, were so, they were enjoying to do that handwriting work. And then France notices some pigeons who were cooing, and he wondered, the German influences so much. Are they going to make these children coo in German? Now, such was the influence of the language. Such was the influence of the Germans. And then a few beetles and bugs came in. Normally in a normal classroom, younger children, they're always looking for some distraction or the other. So if a bee comes in, they say, oh, there's a bee. And until the bee goes out, we cannot work. Everybody covers their ear and all that. But today, there was absolutely no distraction in the class. Everybody was doing their work with a rapt attention. There was nobody who was distracted at all. And they wrote and wrote and wrote. And then M. Hamel was, about the time was about 12 o'clock. The lesson was about to end. Suddenly, the church clock struck 12 o'clock. The Angelus clock also struck 12 o'clock. And the Prussian soldiers were coming, marching. The lesson was about to end. M. Hamel, he stood up to his maximum height. And he was about to say something, but the words were stuck in his throat. He was unable to speak. And with his hand, he made, the gesture that lesson is over. Please go. This is how the lesson ends. So, dear children, I'm sure that you understand how important it is not to waste your time when there is an opportunity to study. After many years, if you feel you want to bring all these days back, it is not going to be possible. So it's a very big lesson that you have to learn from this chapter, that time once lost is lost forever. You can never get it back. If you lose your health, probably you can regain it. If you lose your money, you can always regain it. But if your time is lost, you can never ever regain it. And not only that, keep it in mind that your language is very important to you. Of course, we are studying the English language, which is required for our future. Understand? English language is definitely required for our profession, for our success in the world. English is a world language. All that is true. But at the same time, your mother tongue is very much important in your life. It has an emotional bonding with you. And you can always express yourself best in your mother tongue. You always have to keep all these things in your mind. Now let us come to the important points in this lesson. Just contemplate these questions in your mind. Why was Franz afraid to go to school on that particular day? He was afraid to go to school because he knew he would be questioned on participles. And he did not, know anything about them. So he was looking for excuses to go to cut the class. But unfortunately, he could not do so, and he was, very determined to attend the class. That's why he went there. The next point is, what was the news given on the bulletin board? The news given on the bulletin board was that from the next day onwards, they could not learn French. French would not be taught in the schools in the provinces of Alsace and Lorraine. Rather, only German would be taught. What were the differences that Franz found in the school on the day of the last lesson? There was no noise at school. There were no noises there, like the children repeating their lesson, Mezzo Hamil's ruler banging on the desk. Understand? There was an eerie silence in the school, and the appearance of the headmaster himself, wearing his best dress, the dress that he used for prize distribution days, and the dress that he used for inspection days and all that. Not only that, he also found that the village elders were gathered at the back of the class. They were sitting there, and they also had their old grammar books with them, which they were looking at, and there were tears coming from their eyes because they all realized that it was the last lesson, and it was a way to show, respect for a teacher who had served that particular school for 41 years. Now, next question. What does Mezzo Hamel say about the French language? He says that French is the best language in the world. It is the most logical language. It is the clearest language. And when you are imprisoned, your language always becomes the key to your prison. These are some of the important things, in this lesson. And how does the last lesson end? I already told you that the last lesson, Hamel stands up tall. He wants to speak, but he could not speak. And he makes a gesture with his hand that the class is dismissed. You can go home. So, and he also writes on the board, "Viva la France, Viva la France," which means "Long live France." Whom does he, hold responsible for the lack of learning in the provinces of Alsace and Lorraine? There are three people he holds responsible. One is the children themselves, because they are not interested to learn. The parents, who preferred to put them to work because they wanted, more money from them. And then the teacher himself, who sometimes when he wanted to go fishing, he gave the entire school a holiday, and he also sometimes asked the children to water their plants when he was supposed to teach them. Right? So these are some of the important points in this lesson. Now, let us also take a look at the present condition of Alsace and Lorraine today. Even till date, Alsace and Lorraine have somewhat of a linguistic identity crisis. They don't know actually whether they belong to France or they belong to Germany, whether they should be speaking French or whether they should be speaking German. So today the language that they speak there is a mixture of French and German. It's a different language altogether. If you look at our district of Kasargod, the Malayalam that is spoken is a mix of Kannada, especially in the northern parts of Kasargod. Similarly, when the countries border each other, the border provinces have a different dialect which is comprised of the mixture of both languages. That is the condition of Alsace and Lorraine today. And you will be also interested to note that later France once again captured the provinces of Alsace and Lorraine, and France banned the teaching of German there and once again imposed French. Friends, the important thing is learning every language is good. Imposing a language is not good. It is always good to know more number of languages, as these will be weapons in our armory, but it is not advisable to impose any language on a particular group of people. So in other words, linguistic chauvinism is not good. We should always remember that all languages are equal, and the more number of languages you know, the more powerful you become. It is not a solution to ban the teaching of a language. Rather, we should open our minds to study all languages. The more number of languages we know, the more powerful we become. So now I think it would be easier for you if you go through your textbook and read the lesson. As always, if you have any doubts, please feel free to talk to me in the WhatsApp group. Thank you.